Hello and welcome back. We're preparing to show round number 2 here on Vintage Super League. Welcome, Eric Froelich. You just crushed it with Dredge.
As always.
As always, this is what Dredge does, right? What curse?
Dredge kicks butt and takes names. That's what its motto has been in the VSL. You play Dredge, you lock in your 3 wins, and you go on with your life. You feel a little bit less as a person, maybe, sometimes. But, it's usually a free 3 win, so you take that and you go with it.
And you get to blame that on Athena, right? You didn't even choose this deck.
Yeah, our conversations beforehand, she's like, well, what do you expect your opponents to be on? I'm like, well, probably 3 White Eldrazi decks. What deck do you think is good against them? I'm like, nothing, maybe Dredge. She's like, all right, you play Dredge. I'm like, are you sure? She's like, well, you haven't done that bad with it. I didn't tell her at the time that I was like 0-11 or something like that. I told her today, she's like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best choice.
Well, so far so good. 1 opponent, 1 White Eldrazi deck, and 1 win.
Yeah, that was a bizarre match. I mean, I was just playing off no lands games 1 and 2, which is generally going to be fine when they don't do anything and don't have their hate cards in. In game 1, game 2, I lost and wasn't particularly close. And then game 3, I want to say I'm not sure what he kept, but I did get to see his hand on turn 2, and doesn't have a very good chance of beating me, I feel like. So I'm not sure exactly what his setup was going to be for game 2 and whether it was worth it to risk mulliganing that turn 2 containment priest draw or hoping. I don't know what his fast mana is. I know that Paul in the play-in tournament had I think he had all 5 off-color moxes, or 5 total moxes, Lotus, and Lotus Petal too. So he had a bunch of ways that he could potentially have a turn 2 containment priest. While it looked like the Eldrazi decks that you had been playing and other people had been playing, they were on 4 moxes and 1 Lotus. So that's basically 5 outs. I kept a 7-card hand on the play, so I'm on Bazaar. That's That's a given. And so keeping a hand
game 3, I thought Rich should clearly have mulligans. You can't keep turn 2 containment priest on the draw. It's just not good enough.
That's how I feel, but also he's played against Dredge probably hundreds of times more than me, if I had to guess. I don't consider myself anywhere near an expert, and actually I've been lucky that I've gotten to do commentary a number of times when yourself or Tom have played Dredge to be with Rich Shea or Steve Menendian because they understand the deck better than I do. And so I was kind of just piecing along, but I ended up casting. I held on to the Therapy on turn 2, cast it named Containment Priest because I thought it was the card that they play 3 or 4 of, and I was looking at the hand and I wrote down the cards, and then I spent like another minute. I'm like, there has to be something I'm missing. I guess I just win if he doesn't draw. I don't know if he has Rest in Peace in the deck. Some lists had it, some didn't. It looked like some versions had Leyline of the Void. So, yeah, I'm like, if he doesn't draw Rest in Peace, things look pretty good for me. So I was pretty happy with that.
All right, so we are going to be able to continue bringing you Magic tonight, but it's going to be a little rough around the edges due to our technical difficulties. Basically, you're going to get to watch us make the scenes on the fly. So apologies for the rough around the edges nature of the rest of tonight's broadcast, but hopefully this will prevent XSplit from running out of memory and freezing and forcing us to keep taking the stream down. So Eric and Rich are not playing this match. This match is actually going to be between Luis Scott-Vargas and Brian Kelly. So I'm super interested to see what these guys have brought to the table. And once we get to the... All right, I'm going to guess that's Brian Kelly sticking with... It's not even his Esper Mentor list, is it?
We actually have... we can just leave these names up there. It's very similar. You have Channel Fireball Hall of Famer versus Vintage Champion.
Well, the whole league is that way, right? It's Hall of Famers and Vintage Triggers.
Well, they're on the same side of the screen. We have it all set up. It's good to go. But yeah, I didn't even realize it until I saw Athena setting up the slide with the 5 matchups. I'm like, is our league really 6 Hall of Famers and 3 Vintage experts and the best foodie in all of Magic?
Yeah, I was willing to call Ochoa a Vintage ringer.
No, of course. I mean, Webb has obviously been a Pro Tour mainstay for a long time, Platinum player many times, Worlds competitor many times, one of the best in the game, and of course been playing Vintage since before our producer's been born. So got just a few games of experience under his belt and came in last season just killed it. Just straight killed it. I mean,
No, it's true.
7-2 record, right into the finals. Beat me in the playoff to get the bye into the finals, and then ended up playing a really close match against Luis. It was awesome.
-5. Is he? I saw a flash of the Luis overlay. We'll get it bubbled back up to the top of the scene. I think it's Brian Kelly on the top, and I think
No, that's me on the top.
you did not have Dark Confidant in your deck.
Me and Bob and Tiago, ready to go.
Got it. There we go. Pyro Delver. So Luis with the blue cantrips. This has been the Boogeyman deck. Although I guess if he's on Pyro Delver, he's not on a mentor list. He's on the blue-red version of the cantrip deck. Young Pyromancer, also very, very good. That's interesting.
One of the most painful things in all of Vintage is having to mulligan your opening hand that has an Ancestral in it.
Ah.
It's just a feel bad. All right, so Pop's gonna
This
get.
match is so different from the last one. I'm like, my brain needs to adjust. Dredge and White Eldrazi does not resemble Misstep Sensei's Divining Top. Like,
Hey, you're lucky. You got to warm up. You did a lot more commentary on the play-in than the rest of us, so we're all just getting back into like vintage mode here. This is like I haven't commented on a young Pyromancer in like 6 years.
Do you think he should cast it on turn 1, Eric?
This is actually interesting because obviously you can cast Dak Faden and Young Pyromancer, but that leaves him without a blue card. Using the Dak Faden with one card in hand is not the most exciting, but it's pretty strong. Opponent plays turn 1 top. I assume that Luis is going to instantly just put him on Esper Mentor. This is kind of a deck that Brian Kelly has championed quite a bit and done very well with. I guess it could be also Bant Mentor, the Sylvan Library version as well. All right, so yep,
Yeah.
Dak Faden resolves. Greatest thief.
Luis decides this is better than holding up Force of Will.
So he's going to keep Preordain here, I imagine.
Indeed.
Pretty nice with Young Pyromancer. Try to find something good. He's certainly looking for a card like Ancestral to really make this Dak Faden go crazy. I guess he wouldn't mind finding a Bolt now that the Bob's going to come down.
Yeah, this is pretty bad news for Luis, though, right? The fact that Dark Confidant now resolves?
It isn't. It isn't. He has a Planeswalker and he has Young Pyromancer, and those tokens match up pretty well against a 2/1. So,
Interesting.
I mean, I'd take Luis right now. But, yeah, he's definitely going to want to find an answer to the Bob. And, of course, there's another one in hand. There's a Gush ready to go. So, some solid hands.
Brian Kelly's deck name of -5, referring to the fact that Dark Confidant and Gush are not the best of combos. Looks like he is Esper flavored. So, settle in. Control and control. Just the way we like it with these two, right?
Interesting.
What, keeping the Tundra?
Keeping the Tundra.
I liked it.
I hadn't even gotten to the point of considering it yet. I thought that, I mean, both the 2-drops are so good.
But you can't cast them and cast your Preordain.
That's true, but do you have to?
I think you want to cast Preordain, start making some tokens. I think you kind of need to race this Dark Confidant. And exactly this can happen, right? You Preordain into a chain of spells.
Yeah, but what if you just preordain into Probe Land and then you still get to play your Jace and you got, you didn't have to keep the land. You have a Jace in play that you get to flip next turn. So, I don't know. I mean,
you would have kept a 2-drop and tried to Preordain into land.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I was trying to decide which 2-drop to keep, and then they were both gone. And so I'm certainly not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I hadn't even.
He did in fact wind up with a land there. I think that if he'd known the order of the top of his deck, he would have kept a 2-drop instead of the Tundra.
Yeah.
Interestingly, by the way, Luis's decision to attack with Young Pyromancer and Brian's decision to block, like, they can't both be right, can they? Isn't one of them wrong?
They can, just because Brian knows his hand and knows that he has.
So does Luis with the Cataxian Probe.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I have no idea which one of them's right, but I feel like somebody offered a trade. Somebody took them up on the trade, and they had different opinions about which of those creatures was more valuable.
Yeah,
only information that wasn't public is that Luis is holding a Misty Rainforest.
And that Misty Rainforest in hand is kind of irrelevant when there's a Dak Faden in play. It's
Precisely.
It's just another good card about to come. What? Main deck Sulfur Elemental.
Oh my god!
All right.
What is going on?
I'm a fan.
Does Luis play Paul, or is that just for me?
That's.
Because I definitely play Luis.
I think he said he plays Kai. I think both Luis and I finished the last 2 weeks against you and Kai.
Interesting.
I think that's what he said in the chat, that he put. Oh, I'm sorry, Rich. He put Rich in you.
Luis plays Brian Kelly, then Rich Shea, then me. That is, that's for me and Rich, I guess. Luis was saying in chat he thought between me and Rich he had the expected value of white Eldrazi decks at a little bit over 1. So Sulfur Elemental in the main deck.
Yeah, and I mean a big part of Brian's range is definitely Mentor.
Rich as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the card is great against Mentor. That's totally fair.
Sulfur Elemental could potentially just flash in and block a Silvergill adept, so, you know. He's going to set up the Sulfur Elemental blocking Bob. Nope.
Oh my god.
Doesn't want it.
So this trade Luis doesn't want. Hilarious.
It is a pretty decent clock. This Bob, I mean, there's a reason Brian's deck name is -5. Bob can deal some damage.
True.
Top has already been countered.
Brian's list looks pretty cool. I mean, it's like an Esper value deck. He's got Bobs and Snapcasters. He's got a Tendrils kill baked into it with Yawgmoth's Will, so he can go broken and he can go attrition, just depending on how the game's playing out.
Well, Brian is pretty close to being able to win this game.
He's got multiple main deck Sulfur Elementals.
I think that Brian just has him dead with Tendrils, though. It's real. He gets to play Lotus, Lotus. That's already enough. He gets to play Top Gush.
Sounds right.
So we'll
Luis
see if
got-
this Bob connects for another 2 points of damage.
Luis has 4 mana and 1 card in his hand, so Force of Will is not something Brian has to worry about. He has to worry a little bit about Mindbreak Trap, but I mean that's obscure, not even necessarily in Luis's deck, and even if it was, it's probably not a lot.
Play the Ambush Viper.
Summon a 2/1.
Luis has to know what's up now, right?
It's nothing he can do about it, is there?
There's Force of Will. So, yeah,
Oh,
Brian
wow.
Kelly's got this game.
Yep.
I guess Flusterstorm could theoretically get him. Luis doesn't have it. That's incredible. The Bob beatdown plan.
This format looks wide open. This is crazy.
I don't know if you heard the news, but Vintage is dead because Lodestone Golem's gone.
Tell me more about this theory.
Well, you can't play shops, and you can't play any decks that have, Spear effects, Thorn effects, Dahlia. All these decks are dead.
Got
And
it.
you also
Everyone's
can't play
just-
Sulfur Elemental.
Yeah, I'm like, the Mentor Boogeyman. We haven't seen a Mentor deck yet, but we've seen a bunch of people ready for them. Luis is on multiple main deck Sulfur Elementals. Rich is on Thorns and Thalias. You're on Dredge.
Brian just sends in the Snapcaster, doesn't mind if it gets blocked or killed, because that's another spell for Storm count anyway. Lotus, Yawgmoth's Will. He's going to cast Tendril.
Funny. Well, he can still flash it back, can't he?
No.
Or is he a mana short?
He doesn't have any more mana. He'd be several mana short.
Isn't it land drop, Yawgmoth's Will, Black Lotus? Oh, he can't use 2
Yeah.
land drops.
And that would be 3 more.
Funny.
That would be 3 land drops. You'd have to play
Why
another
would
land,
he-
cast the Will, and then another land on top of that to Tendrils.
What just happened? Why did he Tendrils for 3? Like, if Luis can remove this Dark Confidant, he's actually got 9 power versus an opponent at 9.
Yeah, I mean, that is a bizarre play against... I mean, Luis knows...
I mean, all Luis needs is a way to target it, right? because he can ultimate Dak. Well, I guess he plus the Dak now. So Brian does have a Force of Will, and he does have a Chump Blocker, but I am surprised he did not go for the Yawgmoth's Will kill there. He's going to get away with it, but only just barely.
The funny thing is, Luis has to attack to do anything relevant, which allows Bob to die. Where if he could somehow keep Bob alive, he'd have those outs.
True. Is that wait? Does the Yawgmoth's Will? Oh, he has a land drop, so Yawgmoth's Will turns on Black Lotus Tendrils. It's only a Tendrils for 3. Like in Gush, so it's a Tendrils for 4. That is 8. 4 copies.
Right, so Luis is playing for Darksteel Colossus.
Only gets a Gataxian Probe.
Well, that adds more to the storm count. Yeah, that was a bizarre line.
Wow. I mean, it looked risky to me. I mean, Brian obviously was playing around the one card in Luis's hand. I guess he was playing around Mindbreak Trap, right? If Luis's one card was a Mindbreak Trap...
He had Force of Will.
Right. No, you're right. He's playing around Flusterstorm, I guess? Is that the one card he's worried about?
I mean... sure, but he wasn't...
If he goes Black Lotus, Yawgmoth's Will, and Luis is holding a Flusterstorm, then Luis can actually get him.
Yeah, but if Luis has Flusterstorm when he casts Yawgmoth's Will the next turn, Luis can get him. It doesn't do anything. Like, he ends up taking a bunch more damage. Dak Faden gets to search multiple cards deeper. His odds
by playing around, to your point, by playing around Flusterstorm, he didn't actually play around Flusterstorm.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of anything where his odds of losing didn't increase dramatically by not going for it there.
Interesting. So we're not going to risk
going... at least 3 cards.
So we're not going to risk going to the sideboard scene. We've been having enough problems with XSplit that we're just going to hang out here. When those guys are ready to play, this scene will magically have magic on it once again, and we'll watch and we'll talk about it. Any thoughts about what sorts of sideboard cards these guys might have to bring to bear in this matchup?
There's not going to be too much that Brian can have. I mean, he could have access to more removal spells. He could have a card like Toxic Deluge. He could have Flusterstorms, which are all decent. Nothing incredible. Luis can also have more Flusterstorms. Might want cards like Sudden Shock to deal with Bob. I don't know what he's going to do with Sulfur Elementals, whether he thinks that this deck still has Monastery Mentor or not. Of course, he's seen Tundra.
He does see Tundra, but Snapcaster Dark Confidant?
Yeah, so you can be pretty sure that there are going to be Monastery Mentors in there. Not sure exactly what he wants to take out. He's typically, when you're playing Blue Mirrors, you're looking at taking out very few cards and boarding in very few cards. It's kind of all you can really do because, a typical deck's going to have so many hate cards against the very specific matchups. You might have your Ingot Cheers, your Grafdigger's Cages, cards like that. So I'm not sure. I don't know exactly what Luis has available to him. So I would imagine just the 1 or 2 pieces of removal and maybe a card like Flusterstorm.
How good do you think Sulfur Elemental is against the Mentor decks that are running around? I mean, because that's its primary application. We're laughing about it against the White Eldrazi decks, right? Killing Paul Rietzel's Thalias or White Eldrazi's Thalias is obviously good, potentially good, but the primary application has to be against Mentor.
Yeah, they're good. They cost 3 mana. Of course, Mentor does as well. Can't be countered, which is nice, but you could. I don't know.
I mean, you certainly wouldn't invest in that effect if it didn't have Split Second.
Right.
The fact that it has Split Second, like I've seen a lot of people playing Sudden Shocks as their answer to Mentor decks.
And I do like the card Sudden Shock a lot. I think it, is good against a ton of the creatures in the format, and of course Mentor itself. Sulfur Elemental, it feels like, can usually be dealt with, and then if there's the Mentor in play that it was negating in any way, now that is, able to go off, but.
Suddenly, Luis's tweet of, if you're wondering how good my VSL deck is, so am I. Makes a little more sense. It's what he posted last night after he sent his list in.
I don't know. Like, I don't feel like any of Luis's tweets have ever made sense. So I'm not going to give it to him yet.
Luis kept land preordained, found the land that he needs to turn his hand on. That all makes sense. He's got multiple Swords to Plowshares in his deck now. Swords to Plowshares, I think, is a card which is a lot better in post-Eldrazi world. Like that, people who've been leaning on Lightning Bolts as the removal, I think, are just going to get destroyed when they run into Reality Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers. That was sort of one of the joys of being one of the first guys running that Eldrazi deck on Magic Online was people couldn't kill 4/4s and 5/5s. Nobody had plows. And I hear Luis does not have mentors, but does have white mana and does have Swords to Plowshares. It's actually a really interesting sort of metagame call that Luis has made here. Like maybe Sulfur Elemental was hedging against Mentor, but this Swords to Plowshares are clearly there to be pointed at Reality Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers.
I mean, and mentors too.
Right, but the fact that he doesn't play Mentor because he has Sulfur Elemental instead is bold? Can I say bold?
Well, having Mentor and Sulfur Elemental in your deck seems a little bit odd.
That's what I'm saying. I'm assuming he doesn't have Mentor.
No. Yeah, I'm agreeing. That first game was really interesting. I feel like there were a lot of different decision points that weren't gimmies for Luis, and I think that they ended up working out very poorly for him, although I'm not sure that any decision he made was actually wrong. But, he ended up pitching Forceful, he ended up pitching Young Pyro and Jace, and he ended up attacking with his Young Pyro, and the game was very close in the end where any one of those three cards may have won the game. And of course, if he had kept them, maybe the game plays out differently. Maybe it's all foresight, but it definitely is interesting. Like he got to start on turn 1 Pyromancer Dak, which is a pretty great place to start, but just ended up not working out. A really interesting first game.
Brian has preordained his way into it's a turn 2 Mentor if he wants it, but I think he's actually going to wait so that he doesn't have to commit another Mox to the board. He wants to make an extra Monk token, I guess, is what he's doing.
Oh, right. He knows he's up against Force.
Oh, he knows he's up against Force of Will. Yeah, you're right. That makes way more sense. So he's hoping to find a way to defend it from... Or maybe he's hoping Luis would play the Jace. Luis did not play the Jace. Luis also drew a backup blue card, which we know, but Brian doesn't. Plow your Pyro. Luis doesn't even consider forcing that. Yeah. Now you just trade Mentor for Force and a blue card, right? Certainly that's what Brian has decided to do.
Yeah, Brian's hoping not. He's hoping that Luis lets it resolve and tries to plow it so that he can play his Moxes and get some Monks out of the deal. But yeah, the plows are not looking as fantastic if you still have to use your Force and your Time Walk to deal with that Mentor.
Yeah, they don't line up great against Mentor. They're no Sulfur Elemental.
So this Jace is going to get swords, and Luis's hand is now out of action.
So is Brian's.
So is Brian's. Although if he's able to draw a Worm Coil Engine or something like that, I'll have no problem casting that. Maybe a Mahamoti Djinn.
Or Mahamoti Djinn would be tight here.
Dragon Lord Dramoka. I believe...
How about Jace the Mind Sculptor?
That should do it. So
Luis only has 2 counter spells in his hand.
0.
Yeah, 2 counters in Luis's hand, but neither of them lines up against Jace.
Yeah, that was the best draw possible.
Wow.
Brian definitely plays a lot of decks that are archetypes that people tend to play, Mentor decks, Oath decks, but he definitely slants them towards that Planeswalker control route, and of course Jace the Mind Sculptor being the big one there.
Yeah, I feel like his decks always have multiple angles they're coming from. Like, he'll take a familiar archetype, but he'll twist it, and he'll give himself another angle of attack. And he's been pretty gifted at reading metagames and showing up with decks that line up nicely against what his opponents are running.
Also, he drew Jace the Mind Sculptor.
He had to put it in his deck. Luis had a Planeswalker last game, and it wasn't good enough.
Completely true. But that was definitely the right decision in this game. That this Jace is not beatable.
Yeah. Welcome to the league, Brian Kelly.
Yeah. Good start. Beat the defending champ. It's always good to get that first win under your belt. The weak ones, it's always better to be 1-0 versus 0-1. It's not the most fun feeling to be facing down a potential 0-2 that actually feels like a real uphill climb. And so, his first match playing against, I think a lot of people have as the best vintage player in the world. Of course, other people have Brian himself probably as the best vintage player in the world. A real heavyweight battle for sure, as far as vintage talent is concerned, and to be able to get that win, I mean, assuming he's able to take this down, he's monumental favorite.
Yes.
I guess Luis could draw something like a Jace the Mind Sculptor of his own if he's playing it.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that Luis gets the Flusterstorm the Ancestral does mean that Brian is temporarily out of action in his hand. Luis could, in theory, draw something. Yeah, he's done. He doesn't even need to go through the motions. That Jace is just going to keep delivering up value, value, value. There's a fetch land to reshuffle. The fact that Luis can force a will one thing, not nearly good enough. And there you go. Brian Kelly joins you in first place. If the season ended right now, Luis would be playing the qualifier tournament.
Yeah, that's true. Although, I think that it's going to end up being a 4-way tie and someone's going to draw. So, we'll see how this ends up working out. I'm going to say that Steve Menendian and Kai Bude are going to draw next round. That's my prediction.
That's hard to do.
They'll both have so few minutes left on the clock going to Game 3 that they'll take an ID. But
don't like it. I have no idea if we have a commercial break ready or not. We are going to attempt to set up new commentators, so we will go to a brief commercial break, and when we come back, we will have match number 3 for you guys. So stay tuned.
Congratulations to Brian Kelly.